Government don't create jobs. Government's job is to create the right climate. You can never seriously scale a business. So we just kept on getting bigger and bigger. I got a phone call from the principal of Stirling University and split 50-50 everything else. So I had no capital risk. What happened on the negative side is 2 people got blown out of the water for that, and you need to take the risk and go national.
We're recording today in London with someone I've known for many years, a businessman, investor, political voice, and a very good friend of mine. Welcome, Dr. Robert Kilgour. Robert has enjoyed a successful business career. He founded Four Seasons Healthcare and now leads Renaissance Care. He's been a driving force in Scottish business and now chairs Scottish Business UK. Indeed, it's fair to say that he's had many achievements across social care and business and a prolific career. Welcome, Robert.
Pleasure to be here, Nick.
Your early life, and I remember that one of the very first stories you told me, involved a plug in a bar in Scotland when you were at university.
Yeah, although my business career started before that. I mean, my father was an entrepreneur, so I kind of had that sort of business grounding from a very early age. In fact, on Sundays at home as a small boy, after church on Sundays, I would my mother would go home with my younger brother, and I would go to my father's office, and I would sit in a corner, colouring book and pencils, where my father sat at his desk in his office and did work. So, and then when I was at school, I had lots of entrepreneurial schemes, some more successful than others, and some that cannot actually be mentioned for a variety of reasons, probably. But I did start a student magazine when I was at Loreto in my teens. And that was the first of me having an idea, and instead of just talking about it, actually doing something about it. And then you're right, when I was at university, I failed to get my degree. I was there for 3 years, but I failed to get my degree at Stirling, because I got involved in student politics and was elected treasurer of the Students' Association. But also I started 2 businesses while I was at Stirling. One was I had a stall at Ingliston Market by Edinburgh Airport selling jeans and T-shirts every Sunday. But the one you referred to was the plug one, which I'll go into in a little more detail. That I had a friend who was on one of the student halls of residence at Stirling. Was very much a campus university, and I had a friend who was on the entertainments committee there, and in the main reception area of A.K. Davidson Hall was a pinball machine, a twin plug pinball machine, and it was used literally 24/7, and had money all the way up, people booking their slots. And I said to him, look, you've got 2 plugs there, why don't you rent another machine? And he said, no, it's too much hard work. We've done our duty as entertainment committee by providing what people want, a pinball machine. And so I said, well, would you rent me the other plug for £5 a week? And he said, oh, absolutely. And I can put a machine in. He said, oh, go ahead. So I went to an old school friend of mine whose father had a company, a sort of amusement machine company called Silverlink Automatics in Kirkcaldy. And Carlo and I went to his dad, pitched the idea to his dad. And I said, it must be the most up-to-date. And just video pinball machines were just coming out at that time, whereas the one that was there was a traditional old pinball machine. And said it must be the top-of-the-range machine. You put it in, and every week we empty it together and take £5 out to pay the rent and split 50-50 everything else. So I had no capital risk. In a way, I was risking the £5, I suppose. But we're talking about, this is back in 1975, 76. This is 50 years ago. And it made out like a bandit, if you like. I mean, it was very successful. And the other thing with the jeans stall, because I was treasurer of the Students' Association, I negotiated a deal with myself to, when the student clothes shop closed at 5 o'clock on a Saturday, I got to sign out loads of gear and only had to pay for what I didn't return on Monday morning. So I was able to take a van full of stuff down to Ingleston Market, and instead of having, as quite often happens in any business, you're left with a lot of stock, a lot of your profit is in stock. I was able to undercut a lot of the other stalls at the market selling jeans and t-shirts, because as long as I was selling for even £1 per item above what I was going to have to pay the student shop back on Monday morning when I didn't return, I would return maybe half of what I'd taken and so pay for the other half. So that was an interesting lesson about how to sell and make a profit without getting all your profit stuck in stock that was difficult to shift. So I had a few valuable lessons, but what happened on the negative side is that with the politics and these business things, I failed to get my degree. And then in June, beginning of June 2023, I got a phone call from the principal of Stirling University, who, Jerry, now Sir Jerry, and he phoned me and said, Robert, the university court would like to award you an honorary doctorate for outstanding contribution, your outstanding contribution to philanthropy and entrepreneurship, and an honorary doctorate. So I got my degree. I mean, you know that I'm often late, in fact, always late. Well, this was, the press release we put out about that was that I've broken my own record. I've got my degree 45 years late, exactly 45 years late, with an upgrade to a doctorate. So, I mean, what goes around comes around, if you like. It was, but I always, the person responsible for failing to get the degree was me. I always had a huge amount of affection for Stirling University, and I learnt, even though I didn't come out with a degree, I did come out with a lot of lessons, both life lessons and business lessons, to set me on my path, because I was never going to be suited to, my father had a number of businesses, and I was offered the chance to go into quite a number of them, but they were all office related things, insurance broking, estate agency, that kind of thing, sort of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in those days, and not even Saturday working. And I always knew that I needed to be involved in something that was sort of 24/7. It's just, I couldn't sit still. That was the problem.
The electric plug story, I think you first told me when you and I think 10 years ago, visited the Shetland Islands.
Oh yeah.
For a impromptu viewing of a oil services business run by one of our colleagues, Dave Seaton. So we landed at Sudborough Airport on a beautifully sunny day, which is, you know, very unusual in the Shetlands, and drove an hour to the other side.
Yeah, early May too.
Yeah, to view this this oil services company accommodation that Dave had built. I think they were housing 400 Total oil workers there. And one of the first comments you made when we walked around the bar
that's true.
was there weren't enough machines, gambling machines.
Yeah, I would put a lot more machines in, any chance of renting a plug. No, I do remember saying that to Dave. He wasn't very amused, but I do remember saying that.
Yeah, I think Dave was making more money out of the bar and selling people pizzas than he was out of the oil contract itself.
No, I'd forgotten that.
So you're now the chair of the Scottish Business UK. How did that opportunity arise? What does the role involve?
Yeah, in 2014, when we had in Scotland the independence referendum in 2014, I felt that Scottish business were not engaged enough in the debate and were too shy and retiring. But I had too much on to actually get involved. I gave them some money. I gave the Better Together campaign some money, but I didn't get actively involved. And then we had the Brexit vote in 2016. And I felt post the Brexit vote, I was a Remainer, but we're all leavers now, if you like. But I felt that post Brexit vote, that a second independence referendum was more likely. So a friend of mine, ex-MEP Struan Stevenson, and I set up SB UK in April 2017 to get it oven ready, and we've got a cross-party advisory council of about 50, and we've got over 500 Scottish businesses signed up as supporters. And it's about encouraging the Scottish business community to get more engaged in politics and to put their head above the parapet and to speak out about the benefits, because I'm passionate about the union of the UK, and to encourage them to speak out about the benefits to Scottish business, Scottish jobs, and Scottish public services to Scotland being part of the United Kingdom. And although, as you know, we've been to enough rugby games together that I'm a passionate Scottish rugby supporter, not as vocal maybe as my youngest daughter that you know well, too, Eve, who is a bit more aggressively vocal when Scotland did, on a recent occasion, beat England when we were all there. But no, I'm a passionate Scot, but I'm proud to be British, and a number of things I'm involved in. In fact, a lot of things I'm involved in. I have with a registered charity that I founded with Sir Anthony Selden, the historian and educator, Museum of Prime Minister, and that's to establish a permanent museum to the Office of Prime Minister in London, and we're working hard on making that happen. And that's another example of the union. There's a lot of, most things I'm involved in out with business, either in my non-exec roles or my executive roles, has a union bent of some, to some degree, because it's a passion of mine that the UK remains as the UK and doesn't splinter and break up. So that was what was behind SB UK. But I suppose when I left university, my father, without a degree, my father said, right, what are you going to do now? And so I ended up working in a local bar restaurant, and quite liked that. I did that in Kirkcaldy, then I moved across to Edinburgh and did more of it in Edinburgh, and was fortunate with some financial support from my father to be able to buy an Edinburgh hotel, which had 26 bedrooms, a restaurant, bar, and I built that up and refurbished that over 5 years. And that was perfect for me because it's a 24/7, lots of people, it's a people business, the licensed trade. And that was something which I really enjoyed. But paying for everything by card on a machine, it was all cash. So the busier the hotel and bar got, the more staff I needed, the more cash that was about, the more stock that was flying around. And I found that quite tough. And we just had starting a young family. We had 2 children, one and another on the way. And I an offer, a really good offer, to sell the hotel. And I remember telling my father I'd had this offer, and he asked me how much it was for. And he said, "What did you do? Did you bite their hand off?" And I said, "No, I refused it." And he was sort of, "Oh my God, have I taught you nothing?" And I said, "No, I'm not. It's not the right time, or, you know, they might come back with a higher offer." And he was shaking his head. Now, about a month later, they came back with a 15% higher offer. And I told him, and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I bit their bloody hand off." And so I'd had my first, if you like, successful business in the outside world, in the real world, if you like. And that was in Edinburgh. And I went back to Fife, where I felt was better for bringing up a young family in Fife as opposed to the centre of Edinburgh, and looking for something to do. And I bought a closed, rundown, well, it was a rundown building, but a closed hotel in the centre of Kirkcaldy, Station Hotel in Kirkcaldy. And I was planning, there was a grant available. Now, we're talking about 1987, so a long time ago, but there were grants available of 6,500 a flat to encourage more flats in the area. And so I was preparing plans for 31 flats going in, and I wasn't a builder, so the grant was my developer's profit, if you like. But between buying the property and putting all my profits from the hotel in Edinburgh into it, and submitting the planning, they changed the rules that anything over 6 flats got 0. And even at 31, you didn't get 6 times 6,500, you got 0. So I had all my capital, if you like, in an empty building, and what was I going to do with it? And that's where I heard about, the first time I heard about care homes. And so my entry into the care home sector was completely by accident stroke necessity of what do I do with this B building. And I also had to find a bank that would lend me 100% of the development cost, because all my money was in. And I found British Linen Bank, which I think at the time was part of Bank of Scotland. And Alan Murray was the bank manager that lent me the money. And I couldn't fix the interest rate until the home was, the works were building completion certificate and the home was registered as a care home. And you're too young to remember those days, but interest rates doubled, base rates doubled in that 12-month period. And which was not what any sort of risk analysis that you would do when you project for a rise in interest rates, and you stress test deals that you're looking at or developments you're looking at. So that was a real worry, and I virtually moved into the care home to try and fill it up, because my intention was always to fill it up and then sell it, and that was my exit. But once it was full, because I'd been so heavily involved in it, both in developing it and filling it, and it was very profitable once it was full, I thought, I'll do some more of these. And I did more and more, initially just in Fife, but then I chaired a Macmillan Cancer Hospice appeal in Fife and did some business sort of fundraising lectures with Sir John Harvey Jones, who used to be, he was chairman of ICI, but he also had a TV program called Troubleshooter, where he would go into family businesses and troubleshoot the difficulties that various companies were having, like Morgan Cars was one, of the older generation battles between the older generation in a family business and the younger generation, and the difficulties of succession and all that. And working with him on these Macmillan fundraising for the hospice appeal. We built a hospice in Kirkcaldy on the back of the money we raised. He said to me, Robert, you're in a regional comfort zone. All your care homes are in Fife. And that's what's wrong with this country. You need to break out of your regional comfort zone, and you need to take the risk and go national. And that was the main encouragement to take Four Seasons national. So from opening my first care home in Kirkcaldy in June 1989, when I left in 2000, we had 101 care homes UK-wide and over 7,000 staff, and I had no hair. I still say to I say to my 4 children that they're responsible for the lack of hair, but actually it was that period. That was a real roller coaster. We were undercapitalized, we were doing crazy things, and on several occasions we're close to going under, definitely. You work, you just have to be focused and driven. Each time we thought, well, we'll get a bit bigger and then we'll exit. Every time we got to that bit bigger size, if you like, the bar had moved about what the market was interested in. So we just kept on getting bigger and bigger. So I was exhausted. I kept a financial interest in till 2004 when I exited, but I sold to private equity in autumn of 1999 and left in the spring of 2000, financially exited in 2004, and that's when I founded Renaissance Care. Because when I left, I had a 3-year non-compete, and I said, you can make it 30 years if you like, because I'm not going anywhere near a care home ever again. But actually I missed it, because back to what I mentioned earlier about the hotel being a people business, is that care homes are about people and property, and I like both property and people, and so I did miss it, and so it was good to get back involved. But Renaissance Care is I'm only developing it in Scotland. I've got a really good senior management team that handle the day-to-day. I had several lessons learnt from what I did wrong at Four Seasons that I'm trying to put right or do right at Renaissance Care. A number of some simple things. I mean, at Four Seasons, we expanded too much with too many outliers, care homes way in the middle of nowhere, not connected to each other. We also recruited our senior management team after we had done acquisitions. And we also had a very poor use of technology and systems, both management and accounting. So those were the 3 main ones, and I was determined at Renaissance Care, one, to make it only Scotland, and to develop we've got 19 care homes at the moment and a few other deals in the pipeline, and we've got about 1,500 staff in that business. With about 450 of those 1,500 that are non-UK, so that with overseas visa issues, whatever is occurrent, I've set up an internal staff task force to work out how we're going to deal with all these overseas visa changes. So there's always challenges and difficulties, but I have invested in the senior management team ahead of the expansion. I've invested heavily in obviously technologies this time round is much more advanced, which is great. And certainly health and social care has traditionally been slower engaging with technology. But COVID got it from here up to here. And I was determined at the end of COVID that we weren't going to, our company, Renaissance Care, was not going to slide back down. We were going to use this heightened use of technology platform as a springboard and platform to do more. And so we do some really cutting edge, exciting stuff, including use of AI in support service functions, and lots of interesting things. In fact, I had a working breakfast this morning on a few interesting ideas that we're going to pilot. So it's about being open. But the cluster thing is important too. That Aberdeen's a good example, where I've got 6 care homes in Aberdeen, and I've got 520 staff in Aberdeen across the 6 homes. So each of those homes has a maintenance guy, and each has a staff bank for when there are vacancies or shortage of staff at various times of day. But to Aberdeen together, I've got a maintenance team of 6 in Aberdeen, because I've got 6 maintenance people, 1 in each home. So if I have a problem over here at one of the care homes in Aberdeen, I can chuck 5 or 6 people at that immediately. And also, each of the homes has a staff bank to call on so they don't have to use agency staff. But then Aberdeen itself has an even bigger staff bank with all 6 staff banks. So if you're a staff bank member at, say, Cowdrey Club over here, but Torry needs somebody, you can go and work there. We do interchange. But also for staff recruitment and staff development, it's good, because, and I've got a good example of a lady who was a nurse with us, then a deputy manager of our biggest home in Aberdeen, and then she went to be manager of one of our smaller homes in Aberdeen, and then she went back to being the manager of the bigger home, and now she's the area manager for all of them. And she's done all that career development without moving house and without her children moving school.
Amazing.
So that's where, those are some of the benefits that you can get from developing and expanding the business in clusters. Now, sometimes a cluster begins with 1. If you want to be in an area, then you buy 1 and then you do bolt-on stuff. But whereas 4 Seasons, it was all over the place.
So I was going to say, like we touched on sport earlier, we've, followed many kind of rugby, tennis, football matches together all over the world, New Zealand, Melbourne.
Andy Murray never won a Grand Slam final that
we
attended in Roland Garros for the French or in Australia.
I think we saw 3, didn't we, together? I think they were all against Djokovic, as I recall.
Yeah.
Do you see any parallels between sort of high performance sport and business? Like, obviously I feel like it shows a lot of liking. We have a passion for it that, the team putting.
I think I said this to somebody recently a journalist asked me, why am I still doing this at my, actually, and this journalist actually said this to me, not on camera or anything, but said, why are you still doing all this at your advanced age? Apart from but it was a very attractive journalist, so I still was a bit taken aback. But I said, I love doing deals, not necessarily big deals, and just any type of deal, and interesting deals, and putting a friend over here who's doing something interesting with a friend over there, and putting them together, saying those two, if they knew each other, would not only get on well, but they'd do business together. And you and I know that I've introduced you to my corporate lawyer, David Wiley, and to my insurance broker, John Silcock. And so much business from that introduction between that David Wiley, you, and John Silcock have done. And it's from introducing interesting and like-minded people to each other. And some of the things that you guys do, I'm involved in. A lot of the things that you do, I'm not involved in. That's not the point. It's life's too short, and if you can introduce like-minded people, and working with people you like is key. A few of my father's sayings that I maybe balked at the time when he would parrot them out, of course, but he'd be laughing if he was here today, because he would say, you know, all these years later, you're still using them and parroting them out. But he would find that highly amusing. But what goes around comes around. I mean, they're not his sayings, but the ones that he used to sort of own and use. Another one that was a key one was never, as an entrepreneur, never be afraid to surround yourself with people cleverer and more able than you. And I've never had a problem doing that. I love working with cleverer people than me. And it really ups your game as well, because you have to.
So true.
And you know that. I mean, you really have to up your game and be on your best. I love that sort of energy and pressure. But another one that he had, which I like to try and instill in my children or any younger entrepreneurs, because I do a fair amount of, I do a number of non-exec positions that you know, but also I do a fair amount of entrepreneur mentoring, is that one of my father's favorite ones was, life is not a dress rehearsal.
Very true.
This is it. So make sure you leave it all out on the field. And that is something. And somebody asked me recently if I had any regrets. I said, no, no regrets. It's a no regret policy. Move on, do better. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
just that. And I love Barack Obama, President Obama's comment when he was asked to give advice to a young audience of students or graduates that he was speaking to about what advice would he give them. And he said a simple line, which I know your dad thought was very good, is learn how to get things done. Don't overcomplicate things, just learn. And if you get known as somebody who gets things done, then interesting things will happen. And again, there's a great charity that Robert Peston set up called Speakers for Schools. In fact, I'm doing one next week in Scotland. And you go and speak to 100 or so kids, secondary school kids, about entrepreneurship and you know, getting them to think about maybe entrepreneurship might be something for them. Because I was never academic. I was very much a C student. But I sort of say to these, in fact, I take some of my old school reports along to read, to like, which of course teachers today that I know, when I let them see the reports, they go, you can't do that today. Things like, I've got some framed in my study in St Andrews actually. Completely unteachable, exclamation mark. I mean, that is in a report. Shows absolutely no aptitude for this subject whatsoever, exclamation mark. An impossible child, another one. But I try and get across to these kids that I speak to for Speakers for Schools. And I would encourage anyone in business, because they like having a very wide range of people doing talks all over the country. I tend to do it in Scotland because there are usually shorter people in Scotland, whereas down here in London, whatever, there's usually plenty of people up for doing it. But I try and get across to them that, look, rightly or wrongly, you spend, when you finish your education process at whatever stage, you spend a lot of your time working. So, rightly or wrongly. So if there's something that you're passionate about, whether it's diving, photography, dance, whatever, go focus on a career in something you're passionate about. You'll be a happier person, your mental health will be better, and if you apply yourself and work hard, believe me, interesting things will come across in front of you and will happen. because if you're focused and on something you're passionate about. Again, life's too short and it's not a dress rehearsal, so go for that.
See, you introduced me, as you touched on, to John Silcock, and we successfully sold Borland in 2021, I think. And recently, John and I and yourself and a number of other people we know have now set up Panacea Brokers,
Yep.
headquartered in London and Edinburgh. We were at the first board meeting last week at Stafford Street, which was great, a beautiful part of Edinburgh. And we have so many Scottish clients, which is, you know, a lot of that is obviously down to yourself. What do you think kind of like, you know, are the major sort of Scottish issues at the moment? You know, you've gone through the 2014 Brexit.
The 2014 independence and 2016 Brexit. And I mean, we've always had more parties in Scotland, and now we've got reform in Scotland as well. We've got elections coming up in May next year, and a lot of people don't realise how much is actually devolved. Decision-making and budgets are devolved from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament, less so to the Welsh Assembly, but to the Scottish Parliament there's a lot. And income tax rates are different in Scotland to England. A lot of people don't realise that. And they're not, SNP are not the most, Kate Forbes is very good, she's very business engaged, but she's stepping down in May. But she's been very good and engaging. But a lot of, I mean, Alex Salmond, for his many failings, he really engaged though with entrepreneurs and business. Whereas Nicola Sturgeon and Hamza Yusuf, their view was public sector good, private sector bad, full stop. Which I do worry that the current Labour government down here, there is no business experience whatsoever. In fact, we're sitting on a sofa here, and I spoke last week to who remained nameless, but a Labour government minister, not a cabinet minister, but one rung below. We're talking about employers' national insurance increases and the pressures that put on business decisions and on hiring costs, etc. And he said, "Oh, but Robert, you guys in business always have money stuffed down the back of the sofa or under the sofa or under the bed. You know, this is all sort of rubbish." There's no appreciation, understanding, or value of what business does. And I really worry where growth is going to come from. And we've got a budget coming up in 3 weeks' time. I really worry about that, and I worry where growth is going to come from. Quite a lot of younger entrepreneur friends of mine are saying that they already are teetering on a why bother attitude, and that they'll tread water and run their existing operations, trim it a bit here, trim it a bit there. But a lot of them that I speak to don't have the appetite to borrow more, take risks, invest, create jobs, and whatever. Now, if my small sort of network of contacts, if that's what I'm getting back, is the prevailing attitude that we're sliding into a why bother economy, then that's a huge concern. Government don't create jobs. Government's job is to create the right climate for people like you and I and lots of our friends and acquaintances to create the jobs, which then pays the taxes, which gives the government the money to support, expand, do what they want in public services. But without that growth and those taxes, then it's a really vicious downward spiral. And so I do worry about that. I did find an interesting fact recently. I did find somebody in the current Labour cabinet that does have some business experience. And I was quite shocked. It's Keir Starmer.
Right.
As a young man in the 1980s, he got sort of into trouble with the police in the south of France while on holiday for illegally selling ice creams on the beach with a friend. That's it.
Right.
That is the only business experience that anyone in the current Labour cabinet has. And it's so sad that, I mean, they're all academics, teachers, trade union officials, lawyers, barristers. I've mentioned academics, but it's very sad that we have that, and there's just no appreciation or understanding for what business goes through, what business does, the risks and the heartaches that business do. And I remember Rachel Reeves saying before the election from the podium, sort of podium statement, podium sort of promise, but the frontline delivery has been absolutely abysmal, where she said from the podium, a Labour government will be the most pro-growth, pro-business government the UK's ever seen. Well, we ain't seen that. And I mean, it's so disappointing. But
I just wanted to touch, while we're talking about prime ministers, is obviously your latest project, which is a very exciting and noble cause, which is opening this new museum of the prime minister.
yeah, I mean, that's completely cross-party. I founded it with Sir Anthony Seldon. It's a registered charity. Sir Anthony Seldon, the well-known author and political author and educationalist. And we're very excited about finding a permanent home in the Whitehall area, something near to and similar to the Churchill War Rooms, if you've been to that. And we're quite excited about that as a project. Again, there is a union sort of thread through that, maybe a faint one, but it shows through looking at the history of prime ministers since 1721, Sir Robert Walpole, up to here. It includes, we're covering, like in our website, it covers it in detail too, not just the prime ministers from 1721 to the present day, and we'll probably include a broom cupboard for Liz Truss somewhere in the museum. But it's also including the history of Downing Street, because I can't remember the exact date, but for certainly quite a few decades, from 1721 till the mid-1750s, I think. I don't think Downing Street became the home till about the 1750s or 1760s. I can't remember, but it's certainly a number of decades. So it's a history of the office and what it involved and where it was situated, and also the history of Downing Street, and also history of Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country sort of residence for work and entertaining foreign and domestic guests. So it's something Anthony and I are very passionate about. We've got a completely cross-party advisory council of 25 at the moment, and including people like Dame Penny Mordaunt, Lord Robertson, ex-Secretary General of NATO, who's just done the defence review for Keir Starmer, Baroness Jay, who prominent in her own right, but she was the daughter of James Callaghan, Labour Prime Minister, Lord Asquith, whose grandfather was Prime Minister, Dan Snow, the historian, who's actually, I think he's a grandson of David Lloyd George. So it's a really interesting cross-party, and I love sculpting. This is building teams. Again, we're back to building teams, like I did at SB UK or with Museum of Prime Minister. And I also set up a thing 2 years ago called the Social Care Foundation to encourage support and help reform social care. And that, we have an advisory council of 12, and I was founder and chairman, and then I decided to sack myself last year as chairman because I got the chance to recruit Damien Green, ex-MP and ex-Deputy Prime Minister, as chairman. And that's been a huge, I mean, as an ex-journalist, he's very good at writing and pulling stuff together. It's been a joy working with him the last year. So I like having ideas and bringing them to life and pulling in people from different places together to move it on. And quite a few of these things, then I like I've done with the Social Care Foundation, to step back and let the people you've put together, like I do at Renaissance Care. I'm not involved in the day-to-day. If you've got really good people, you'll only keep really good people, in my opinion. If you don't, if you give them a strategy and a vision and you let them get on with it. Another thing that my father used to say was that you can never seriously scale a business unless you delegate, and delegate properly and meaningfully. Yeah. You cannot do it. And that's something, I mean, I've seen so many entrepreneur friends that say to me, you know, how do you keep your senior management team together for so long? You know, we're always losing people and whatever. And how do you grow businesses so quickly into such a size? And it's about having the strategy and the vision, hiring really clever people who love doing the bit they're doing. And then your job is to set them the strategy and the vision, sell it to them, but also support them where you can. I mean, I have two non-execs at Renaissance Care. One comes from an care home operational background, and his job is to support and challenge the operational team. And I have a second non-exec who comes from a care home finance director background. And his job is to support and challenge my finance director and his group finance controller and their team. So it's building a sort of, if you like, a finance team and an operational team, both exec and non-exec. And then also getting, so that we don't like having silos, or if you've got the operational silo and the finance silo and they don't speak to each other. It's getting, for example, getting the finance director out of his office round the care homes, seeing where that money, that 50,000 that he signed the check for new carpets, where that, actually seeing where that has gone and the benefit that it makes on the ground, getting them out of their ivory sort of tower. And we're very fortunate at Renaissance Care to have a managing director, nurse background, an operations director, nurse background, and a finance director, very much finance and private equity background, who personally get on and have their battles on budgets and things, which I keep out of. It's above my pay grade. But again, we put a system in that we got from a company called Kent Finance. It took several months to develop it and install it, which is a financial management system, but a business modeling system, really, that is bespoke for took 6 months to get the system then bespoke for our business. And it not only is brilliant for budgeting, where if you change something over here, it flows through. It shows what effect that has, both positive and negative. But also for acquisitions, where we can plug in acquisition A into the business model against acquisition B. And you might think A is the one that's better for us, but actually, if you plug it in, you find that A creates 3 pressure points, whereas B creates 1. And you don't have to add an extra sort of regional manager or something with it. So I find again, learning from the Four Seasons lesson, that investing in systems ahead of needing them, so that if you get the phone call, I mean, the care home sector is having a tough and challenging time, and a lot of people are desperate to get out of it. But I'm generally I'm a Scottish rugby supporter, so I'm a glass half full as opposed to a glass half empty person. But I do feel that challenging and difficult environment that the care home set, despite the challenging and difficult climate that we currently have for the sector, from attack on all sides, and very much the government's attitude of NHS first and social care second, which is hugely annoying. But the demographics, the underlying demographics are very, very good for the sector. So with the challenges, but I look at it, let's say glass half full, that actually you take the underlying demographics into account and accept the challenging circumstances and try and turn that from a negative to a positive. And say that means if you have the right platform, senior management team, operational systems, financial systems, and you have a decent economies of scale with us having 19 care homes, and I think we're turning over 50 million a year or something at the moment, then you can take advantage and pick up some really good acquisition opportunities, because people just who haven't invested the time and effort into the senior management team, the systems, and don't have enough economies of scale. I mean, one of the things finally that is staggering about normally a sector that has most sectors have a consolidation over a period of time, but 20 years ago, the 10 largest care home operators in the UK accounted for about 28% of UK beds. 20 years later, the 10 largest care home operators account for about 18%. So instead of consolidation,
splintered,
fractured, splintered, and my sense is the future of the sector is in strong regional care home operators, not in the kind of huge companies that there were 15, 20 years ago. Those days are gone, and they're not coming back. Strong regional players is the future, and I can see that percentage continuing to go down. And the largest care home companies in the UK now have maybe there's 2 of them have 300 care homes, whereas 20 years ago there were a number that had 500, 600, one had 750. There's economies of scale and benefits if you have sort of 40, 50, 60. And you're strong regional in clusters, and you have a self-help sort of in the cluster setup. But beyond that, it's actually only more and more layers of management and decision making, and that the care home sector is a lower margin business now, especially post-COVID, than it was a number of years ago. That's one of the things I've really noticed, and therefore it's really, you have to manage your money, your cash, and your systems. The lower the margin the business is, the more you have to manage with great, great care. And that's something which, thankfully, we've been ahead of the curve on.
Oh, totally.
But do you have any other, what other?
Well, I just wanted to wrap up with a couple of quick fun questions. Your favourite Scottish expression?
Well, my mother, late mother, loved the word blether, which I do love. But another one that she liked was "Had your weast," which is kind of be quiet, or a sort of a more pleasant one about a sort of parting thing would be "Long may your lum reek," which is kind of long may you have good health and happiness and success in business. So Scotland, yeah, we have a few. So that's in that
I
one.
wanted to touch on, a number of your family members work in companies that you and I own together, your children particularly. And, obviously Eve Kilgour has worked for me for 10 years, has gone on to do great things now, in the event space. Russell flourishing at Sherpa Online, the edtech business that we've both invested in. And obviously Anya at Renaissance Care doing super well, and your other daughter who doesn't work for us, doing very well in the fashion world. But also, I think an interesting one was, your nephew
Following their passions, that's the key thing. Allowing them to do that.
Rory, who's had a really interesting career. I just wanted to touch on that, before we finished. That he recently, or 2 years ago now, purchased Wraith Rovers Football Club.
Well, he's a director of Wraith Rovers, and he's an investor and part of the consortium that bought Wraith Rovers. But I did warn him about doing this, because he's been a Wraith Rovers supporter from sort of a toddler, really. And I said, I think you'll find that your enjoyment of going to the matches and supporting it will diminish now you're one of the owners and a director.
Totally.
And he has admitted, he did take me aside recently and did admit that that was something that he was. He's still passionate about it. He's a passionate, sort of real committed, sleeves rolled up, let's get it done type of guy. And he is finding, having in his business, he's now got more and more employees. And he was moaning to me too recently about that having lots of employees is quite tough. And it is a tough gig.
I think with the passion thing, you have to strike a balance between, or work out in your mind, is it actually I enjoy going to that event or that restaurant or that concert? It doesn't mean that you actually want to run it. It doesn't mean that you want to own the club because you like going to Annabelle's on a Friday night. It doesn't mean you want to own it.
No, that's true. And so you had some quick fire ones. Is that?
Yeah. So one piece of advice to your 25-year-old self.
It would have to be this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. Make the most. And it's something I sort of, to their annoyance probably, I keep adding. I did actually make a piece of advice at a speech that I made when I got my honorary doctorate to the graduates. I was asked to speak for 6 minutes or something. And I did say to them, great, you guys, networking is key. Network. And social media, use it all the time. Great. But do please remember that employers like me, we do check and read social media, and be careful what you put on social media. And I was looking up at the audience while I was saying this, and it was funny because a lot of the parents were going like that to the kids, and a lot of the kids were going, well, I was going to say kids, but graduates were going like this, But it is something, and in fact, Anya, my eldest, who's HR director at Renaissance Care, did say to me one Friday, normally they don't get me involved in these things, but they said, we've got our new quite senior job, and we've got 3 people that we can't choose between the 3 of them for this quite senior job, and we'll have to come to you for a decision on or help on which one to choose on Monday. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Anya, have a look at the 3 of their social media over the weekend. And so it was Monday lunchtime or something, and Anya hadn't phoned me, so I phoned her, and she said, oh no, sorry, you're not needed, Dad, it's all right. I had a look at the social media over the weekend, and that blew 2 of them out the water, and we offered the 3rd one the job this morning. And this was, I mean, we're talking about in Scotland, but this was a job about 70,000 a year plus bonuses and whatever. And so two people got blown out of the water for that when they were in with a chance because of what they put on social media.
Well,
But then it's a good job that they didn't have smartphones in my day at university in my youth. I have people my age, when we talk about our university days and our younger days, frequently we talk about smartphones are great, but I wouldn't want to be a youngster these days with the kind of photographic sort of machinery that is just everywhere.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
From the plug socket, the university, to building the major healthcare business twice, shaping public debate, championing social care, an inspiring journey. I'm so glad, I've only been involved for probably a decade or so, but we've had some great time and hopefully many more to come.
Despite my advanced age or advanced years, as that journalist said to me the other week, I'm by far not finished yet. I have lots of ideas and plans going forward. I have no retirement plans whatsoever. I have somebody who both inspires and humbles and also makes me feel quite inadequate when I go and see him, is a guy called Sir Boyd Tunnock, who's chairman of Tunnock's, and they employ over 600 people at a factory in Uddingston, south of Glasgow, and I have a care home next to their factory. And I was in to see him a couple of months ago, and so his car was in the car park, and he's sitting behind his desk with his white coat on, shirt, tie, and he's in there, maybe not for a full day every day, but he's in there every day, and he's 92 years of age. And we've discussed retirement, and he said, Robert, I'd be dead within a year if I retired. I as long as I work smart, he's got his daughter, son-in-law, and grandson working in the business. And he works smart, he delegates, but he's very much on the strategy and the vision aspect of it. And this is a great thing about, instead of being a corporate animal, working as an entrepreneur. There are negatives about being an entrepreneur, but one of the best positives him and I agree on is that there's no mandatory retirement age for being an entrepreneur. And you and I will still be doing deals in my dotage. When I'm in my dotage, you and I will still be doing deals, and that's what we like doing. So long may it continue. Thank you.